Okay, so this one, just remembering A, B, C, D. What do all the things do? Okay, so this is A, and this is a D. So it is a what by 4? Do you remember the word that it does? Vertical stretch by 4. And then up 3. Do you also remember it would have to go in that order? Right? Because you'd have to do anything that's a multiply before an add. So order of operations as well. Okay, this is a B and a C. So in an order, you would do what and then what? You would do the 4 first. It is a, do you remember? Horizontal compression. Everything with X is opposite of what your brain sees. So if you see that times by 4, it's actually really a divide, right? Think opposite. So write 2. Okay, are you okay if I skip a few? These aren't anything crazy. Can we do this one? What is it going to do? Yeah, you can't even start it, right? How do you fix this? Factor out. And then write down the transformations, right? Okay, the last one is a negative. So there's a reflection and then what? Reflection, how so? Over. Ooh. Over the x-axis. Because it is an A.
Because the pre-cal exam is weird.
Ooh. Yeah, Morgan's already finding documents about it online.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Like cheating?
No.
Somebody's paying, somebody, you can pay somebody for copies?
It's not.
I just want to know what the going rate is for me.
It's not hard to find. Which means they want people to see it.
Sounds like cheap, Morgan.
Oh yeah. I thought you were looking for copies of the actual test.
No, that would be impossible.
It would not be impossible at all. They're sitting in my office. Now I know who to look at though.
Now I'm gonna break it. Hold on, yes.
Oh.
Not,
I hope not.
not,
Yeah, John, that is true.
not until it's done.
Okay, so there's a reflection over the x-axis, and we have a 3 in the B position. So horizontal compress by 3, then the plus 2, so up 2. I should add something like this on there. Because what happens if B is 1/5? Then it actually does a horizontal stretch by 5. Okay? Do you remember what is going on? You're doing x divided by b, So in math, if you divide by 1/5, you're timesing by 5, right? So that's why it's a stretch by 5. Okay, I don't know, let's just pick a few here. I don't know why I put so many on. Let's do this one. Okay, write me your math equation. If you don't know this transformation equation, you're going to get lost on a lot of questions. This one has to be down pat. So what is the whole gist of it again? X over B minus C AY plus D. Make sure that's in your brain because that's a lot of questions, right? So X divided by 3 minus 2, because that's the B, that's a C. Y minus 1. Okay, then what happens to the point? So if it starts with an x value of 12, what's the new x value? So if x is 12, divided by 3 is 4. 4 minus 2.
Where'd you get 12?
Is that not what the question says at the start?
Oh, my bad.
The original point? The original point is 12, negative 8. 12, negative 8. So 12 is now a 2, right? And negative 8 would turn into a... Okay, on the next section here, this is a negative A, so that means I want to negate a Y. So this one is a negative on the B. So what's happening? X is changing, right? Okay, so this next one, you need to understand what this language means. What is that little representation of? Inverse. And what does an inverse do? X and Y change around. Does anybody remember the other way to say that? You can reflect over Y equals X. Okay, let's go to F here. This is a B, this is a C. I don't really like this question. I wanted a different one. There's a B and there's a C. And what do the absolute values do? It absolutes the heights. So I heard everything's positive almost, but you could be 0 as well though. So maybe we can just refrain, everything goes positive to just not negative maybe. Well, this one wasn't tricky because there was no transformations that changed the y before the absolute. So I should have given a better example that would. So the question was talking about the order. So I'm gonna just kind of draw or do some different ones here. Okay, so if I do this, this says the absolute value of f of x and then plus 1. And then this says the absolute value of f of x plus 1. They're different questions. Okay, why are these different? You would do the absolute first, and then you would do the up second. On this one, you would do the absolute value of your height, and then go up. On this, you would do up first, and then absolute second. Different, right? When you do those graphs, I suggest you just graph them step by step. Graph them step by step if you saw something like that. Okay, so this one says graph negative. So this is a A. Okay, so 2, 2 would now become 2, negative 2. Zero, negative 2 would become 0, 2. And negative 4, 0 would be, what's this word, if I had to use a word? Invariant? Remember that word? Reflection, looking at your reflection. Okay, are you okay? I don't know, I don't want to do all these, there's so many. Do I need to do this one? Are you guys okay? You would just make the points. That one I feel like we're strong at. Okay. So this one, absolute value. Let's go -3 at the end of it though. I'm gonna make a different.
Come on.
Did you already do it?
No.
Oh. Okay, I'm just going to make it harder so you know what to do. Absolute value of it, -3. So, step by step, what's the first thing? Should you absolute and then go down, or down and an absolute? You got it. Absolute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to physically absolute this. So this point stays. This changes positive. This overlaps. So do you see my yellow? This is the negative portion changed positive, and this portion stayed put. Positive stays positive, negative has to change. Then take my yellow graph and shift the yellow down 3. On your exam, pay attention. If there's a dot, you put a dot. If there's an arrow, you put an arrow. Okay? So absolutes, physically draw. Don't try to math equation them, just physically draw them. Okay, another one we haven't seen. What is this? If you just saw that, do you know what it means? Reciprocal. Okay, f of x is the height, so we're flipping the height around. So I always start with 0 because if you flip the height of 0, it's that, which is now what? Asymptote. So there's an asymptote at 2 and at -4. So that's always my step 1. Then I look for heights of 1 or -1. Because if you flip 1, what happens? Invariant. 1 and -1. So there's 3 invariant points. Then the pattern, away and close. Okay, so this is the farthest point away from 0. It's the highest, so now it would become closer to 0. So if it had a height of 5, it would now have a height of 1/5. Do you see the section where my pen is right now? This little section? The heights are close to 0, so now the new heights will go away from 0. Can anybody tell me if this graph was just a little different? What if this graph had the arrow at the top there? There's something that would completely change. You would now have a asymptote. Asymptote.
Wait. Oh, I see.
If this had an arrow, then this has a closer to 0 arrow, which is an asymptote across the horizontal. This one stopped, so this stopped. So you didn't have that get closer to pattern. Okay, we have a function, and now we need to write the inverse function. So again, inverse, what does inverse mean?
Flip X and Y.
X and Y switch around. So f of x is essentially the current y. So I'm going to put an x there. And then 3, and I'm going to put a y there. So there's my switch. And now I need you to figure out how to get this y equals alone. So I would add 5, divide by 3, square root, okay, so I have a problem here. Write a restriction on the domain so that the function would be, so this relationship would be a function. Why is it not a function? It's because a positive radical looks like that and a negative radical looks like that. Do you remember what a function is all about? Vertical line test. A boy is not allowed to have 2 girlfriends.
No,
That's the fail.
but a girl's allowed to have 2 boyfriends.
That is okay.
Messed up world.
Okay, so let's talk about the restriction. Okay, do we know how to graph that? Do you know what that looks like? Parabola, what about it? Where would it kind of start? -5. It would just look like this. That's all it would do, right? So what do you want to do? You could either take this part of it or this part of it. It doesn't matter. But what do you want to do? What's this domain? What would you do for this domain? What would you do for this domain? X is above or equal to 0 would be an option. Or that would be the other option. So let's pretend this question said, write the equation, and then it said x is greater or equal to 0. If it said that, that means we're only doing the positive radical. If it had done the other one, we would do the negative radical. Do you remember domain and range relationships with inverse? The function domain is equal to the inverse's range. And vice versa. Can I also not write the next part? You get the picture? The function's range would equal the inverse's domain. So here's a super quick question. If f of x has these 2 points, what's the range of the inverse? There's 2 points that I gave you on f of x, and what's the range of the inverse then? Okay, so the range of the inverse would be the domain of the original. What's the domain of the original? Those x values. What do you do when you just list things? Not an interval. What if you do if you want to just list a few items and that's it? The squiggly brackets. and then you can just list a few items if that's all you have. This is not from 1 to 2. If you write me this is wrong because it's meaning everything between 1 and 2. I just have a 1 and just have a 2. That's it. Okay, can you make equations? Some of you found this a little bit tricky, so just a little bit of a star here. Some of you found it tricky. Okay, so this is the original and it turned into that. So in an order of bed mass, do you physically see anything? So let's talk about bed mass. I'm looking for reflections, stretches, and compressions. You see a reflection. Okay, I'm going to do that then. You told me you saw a reflection, so I reflected it. What kind of reflection is that? Do I want to put the A on the A or the B negative? That would make a negative with the B, so I have to think about that. Okay, look at mine. Look at this. Do you see any other things? Stretches, compressions, or reflections?
Looks like you get higher.
Higher is an up movement. So I'm not there yet. I want to make sure I've done all my multiply divides.
It looks like it goes
Vertical stretch.
Okay, there is a vertical stretch. Let's talk about these 2 points right here. What is the space between them?
2, 3,
There's 3 spaces between them. How many spaces are between them over here? 6 spaces vertically. So how did we stretch that vertical space? Vertical stretch by 2. So that's an A, right? I'm going to be doing an A of 2. Okay, so take what I have here. I can give you some colors here. So the first thing, yellow. Now I'm going to stretch that. So all the heights need to double. So this 0, 3 is now 0, 6. This would stay put, right? Because if you stretch the height of 0, that doesn't move. And 7, 5, right? I did this one over there is now 7, 10. So I'm going to call this my pink one here. Okay, do you see what I did? I reflected it, I stretched it, and now, what other kinds of things do you see from my pink graph to the end?
up to.
And then we would have to go up 2 and we would get there. Okay, so we have to put this, the 3 ideas, we're done, this is good, but we have to put it into an equation. Okay, so the final graph was called a g of x. So g of x is f of x with all the stuff we did. So fill in. We did a 2 multiplier, a negative b, and an up 2. Those are all the things you told me you did to f to get to the g. Okay, I think we have 2 more questions to go when we're done. Okay, we have a sine curve. So what I need you to do is draw me what a sine curve looks like. Forget all these other numbers. What does a sine curve look like? There's a cos, there's a sine. It starts in the middle. Cosine starts on the top. That's a sine curve. Okay. Normally, this height and this height would be 1, -1. Can we already stretch by 4, though? Is that okay to start with? Stretching by 4, instead of 1, I'm going to go to a 4. Okay, this coordinate here is the end of a cycle. In this, it's called a period of the graph. What is this position normally at? It's normally at 2 pi, but what do you have to do with x values? Divide by b's. So there is a b right here, that's a b. So I'm going to divide by pi, which means this is a 2. Which means what's each tick going up now? 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2. So I always do A and B. Now I'm going to do another graph. So I'm going to put the C and the D. I'm going to put the C and the D into this one. Okay, I give myself some references here. Up to, I'm going to note to myself, that's where the middle of the graph should be. Because here the middle of it was a height of 0, now the middle is 2. What's the top height?
6.
6 would be a high. What's the bottom of this curve going to be at? -2 is the low. So there's, for me, and I'm going to go a half, 1, 1.5, 2. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to think about is the direction here. This is a right 1. So 0, 0 is now going to be at the coordinate 1, 2. Zero, 0 has now shifted 1 right up to, and then you can just pattern it from there. You don't have to go point by point. So if I'm going to move a half, I should go to a top, and at the next a half I should be at a middle. Can you work yourself backwards here? On these I put arrows because I'm telling you the pattern's going to go on and on and on. Unless the question says over the domain from here to here, then make sure you go from there to there and put points. Okay, just a few of these words. Let's go Let's do those 3 words. How would you state the range of this function? What's the low to the high? What does the amplitude mean again? The distance from the middle. So we are 4, and that's also the same as the A. A, amplitude, A, all the same. And the period was 2 pi over B, so it took us 2.
Is it, no, because it's negative 2 to 6.
Okay, the last one today.
Oh, yeah.
One of the,
Okay, we had a max
which is negative,
of 8 10,000,
no, it keeps going.
and then
Do X, Y,
10 years later, we reached a minimum of 2,000. So you have to be careful here because the word says 10 years later. 10 years later, not at 10, 10 years later.
Oh, it's actually tricky.
Okay, my first thing is I'm going to think about what's the middle. Okay, you're working to get A, B, C, D's in here. So my first instinct is figuring out what's in the middle of the heights. So there's a 2,000 down there and there's a 10,000 down there. So what's smack dab in the middle of that? 6,000. So where does it go in the letters? Which does it affect? The D. The D. That's a shift up. The middle of the graph has now shifted up there. Next, I'm going to ask myself about the amplitude. How much am I going above and below? 4,000. So that is this stretch off of the line. Okay, next we're going to talk about the period. So how much space is there? Would we agree there's 10 spaces in that? Is that a cycle?
No.
No, it is only a half. I'd still have to go all the way here. So the period equals 20, right? So 2 pi over some kind of b would have to end up being 20. And then you can just flip-flop those letters around. I'm just going to do a pi over 10, just reducing it. And this has asked for a sine. So how does sine start again? We just did it.
Middle.
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 So should I pick this one?
No.
No, this is not a sine, even though it's a middle. I would need to figure out this location. Or I could do this location. That would work too. Which one do you want me to do? Do you want
That
me?
one.
What's that one?
The left one.
This one?
I think it's
Okay.
third.
How about you figure out the one in the middle? You can do that easily.
Yeah,
What's between there?
13.
13. what's my scale going up by? What am I doing here? If the whole period is 20, each move, how many quadrants are there on a circle? 4. So divide by 4, what's each move? 5, right? Each tick is a 5. So this would be a 3. So if my period is 20, you can cut that into 4 quadrants kind of idea. Each is 5, so I'm going to go -3 to show you that this is a positive 3, right 3. Some of you might have wrote that as well. That would be good. That's correct. Any 20, so I could go 20 more if you really wanted to be a smarty pants.
It's just itching to do that.